Happy Sabbath. Happy day. All right. Let us thank God for um, the wonderful blessing of the Sabbath um, and for keeping us this whole week until today. Uh, the consummation of everything that we have been discussing and learning, at least as far as presentations are concerned. What will be left afterwards is a work for each one of us to do in keeping the things that we have learned. So this morning our topic is Sabbath reform. I will confess that there's a slight change. Even as I was mentioning yesterday, I mentioned Sabbath reform because in my original planning, when I was asked to submit, I had thought that I could cover both music and Sabbath. But then I realized that I will only be able to do Sabbath. So that's my apology to you that I will not be able to do the aspect of music. I hope that at least by covering some things in entertainment, we may be able to apply. But I do know that it would have been good to have a special set of lessons on that. So we're going to do a Sabbath reform this morning. And we'll begin in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3, where we are told about the Sabbath. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 reads, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. 2. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." So, how many things did God do on the Sabbath? According to these verses. Okay. He rested, okay, and blessed and sanctified. Okay. So I want you to imagine that first Sabbath, especially on the light of creation, like Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve have just been created, and we know that Eve was created, we could say, maybe close to the beginning of Sabbath, okay? Are we together? Because in the beginning, God first creates all the animals, okay, and then he creates Adam, and then Adam has to name all the animals, and then afterwards God puts him to sleep and then creates Eve. So Adam and Eve are together, and then now it's Sabbath. What do you think happened on that first Sabbath? They haven't been working, per se, during the week, and everything around them is new. What do you think happened on the first Sabbath? Okay. They were inquisitive and curious about everything. And who came and taught them? Okay, God. So basically, God gave them instruction on that first Sabbath, enlightening them on the various things that he had made and revealing the wonders of creation. So from the time that Adam and Eve had sinned and on to generations that followed, God had people that would preserve his law. The line of Seth is the one that remained obedient to God. And from that time, even up until Noah, up until Abraham, we read in Genesis chapter 26, verse 5, that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So even the Sabbath was kept by people like Abraham. And then the children of Israel go to Egypt, and then something happens. They become slaves. And you remember that as slaves, they were being told to do work, and it was very heavy work. Okay? And so when we read Exodus chapter 5, verse 5 to 10, we find that when God was telling Moses to uh, to deliver the children of Israel, the Sabbath was not left out. Verse 5, and Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land now are many, and ye make them rest from their what? From their burdens. Now, when you read it in context, it says that, okay, allow us to go 3 days into the wilderness, and what? So that we should offer sacrifice, okay? That's what it says, right? Yeah. But then, let's continue reading. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and the officers, saying, ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, and the tare of the bricks which they did make heretofore, ye shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go and sacrifice to our God. 9. Let there more work be laid upon them than they may that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. So to Pharaoh, all this was just nonsense. It was something that he did not think should happen. He did not even understand. But then when you look at it from the context of the great controversy, we understand that God, okay, is trying to reinstitute Sabbath worship among his people. And Satan was aware of this. So he wanted to make sure that the children of Israel do not go Satan did not want the children of Israel to go back to Sabbath worship, because we know that as the Sabbath is kept, we are reminded of who? Of God as creator, okay? So the more we contemplate and meditate upon God as creator, the less likely we would be to deviate from the path of right. So commenting on this in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 258, paragraph 1, Sister White says, in their bondage, the Israelites had to some extent lost the knowledge of God's law, and they departed from its what? Precepts. The Sabbath had been generally disregarded, and the exactions of their taskmasters made its observance what? Apparently impossible. So people began to believe that we're not going to be able, if we want to keep up with work and everything, to keep the Sabbath. Okay? But Moses had shown his people that obedience to God was the first condition of deliverance, and the efforts made to restore the observance of the Sabbath had come to the notice of the oppressors. So we see that Moses had been trying to teach the people to keep the Sabbath, and then some of them decided to obey that command, and that is the reason why there was a report that comes to Pharaoh that some of the people are resting from their burdens. Okay, and then she continues to say something. She says, God brought his people, Israel, from Egypt that they might what? Are we together there? So it seems like, or it would seem like that the sole purpose of them coming out of Egypt was so that they could keep the Sabbath, so that they could glorify his name. And he gave them special directions how to keep it. The 10 precepts spoken by his own voice from Sinai and his instructions given to Moses were recorded for the benefit of all who should live upon the earth to the close of time. God has given man 6 days for labor, but he has reserved the servant to himself, and he has pronounced a blessing upon those who keep it holy. The day before the Sabbath is to be made a day of preparation, that everything may be in readiness for its sacred hours. Bake that which you bake today, and seethe that which you seek. Then it continues, tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Divine mercy had directed that the sick and suffering should be cared for. The labor required to make them comfortable is a work of necessity, and no violation of the Sabbath. But all unnecessary what? Work should be avoided. Many carelessly put off till the beginning of the Sabbath what things? Little things that should have been done on the day of preparation. This should not be. Any work that is neglected until the commencement of holy time should be finished. Are we together? Are we together, God's people? No, we're not together. Okay? Any work that is neglected until the commencement of holy time should what? Remain undone until what? Okay, we'll speak about that. But then when you look at the history of the children of Israel, you will find that it is simply a history of Sabbath breaking. Because time and time again, they kept on breaking the Sabbath. And up to the point where in 2 Chronicles 36, verse 21, we are told that it is the reason why they went to bondage. To fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her what? A Sabbath. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept what? Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years. So God was willing to allow 70 years of the land keeping the Sabbath because the children of Israel had been breaking it. Are we together, God's people? Okay. Now, the sign of the Sabbath. Ezekiel chapter 20 verse 12 is a verse that is well known to many of us. So I want us to read it, and then I want us to isolate some important lessons from it. It says, "Moreover, I gave them my Sabbath to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them." Are we together? Is that clear? Are we together, God's people? Okay, let's read it again. Moreover, who? Who's I? Okay, gave them my Sabbath to be a sign between who? God and who? And us. Are we together there? Okay. That who? Who's we? Okay, no. We can't go. You said us, and then I asked who's that? Okay. Who's we? Who's us? The children of God who are keeping the what? Sabbath, okay? That we might know that what? God, okay, is the Lord that what? That sanctifies us. Now, there's a certain truth to this verse that is not necessarily said in the verse, but we could imply. You see, many of us, as we read this verse, we think, okay, the Sabbath is a sign between God and us, yes? But then it's a sign to the heathen, okay, that they might see that we are in right relation to who? To God. But in this verse is specifically saying that he gave us his Sabbath to be a sign between him and us, okay? And who is the one that is to know? The heathen? No. We are the ones that are to know, that they might know that I am the Lord that what? That sanctifies them. And here is the secret to overcoming that God has embedded in the Sabbath. And if you consider all the reforms that we've been discussing throughout the week, if we could simply understand the principle that is over here, we would find ourselves not having any of these problems that we have, any of these struggles that we have. Are we together, God's people? Let me give an example. If I am someone that is addicted to watching movies and all this media, and then Sabbath comes, I know that I'm not supposed to do my own pleasure. Are we together? So I lay them aside. And from sundown to sundown, I manage to keep that away from me. Okay? I have survived 24 hours without what? Without doing that. And then God is saying, okay, I am the Lord that has given you the power to survive how many hours? 24 hours. I will also give you power to survive how long? For all the days. Are we together? And so, what happens is, for each one of these things that we're struggling with, on Sabbath, God will give us that strength to put it aside. And then in giving us the strength to put it aside on that day, we learn that he is able to help us to fast from those things, not just for that day, but for the rest of our lives. Are we together, God's people? So God says it is a sign between you and him, between us and him, that he is the one, he is the Lord that sanctifies us. And so Counsels for the Church, page 261, paragraph 4 says, "From the pillar of cloud, Christ declared concerning the Sabbath, Verily, my Sabbath ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye might know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you." The Sabbath, given to the world as the sign of God as the creator is also the sign of him as what? Sanctifier. The power that created all things is the power that recreates the soul in his own what? Likeness. To those who keep holy the Sabbath day, it is a sign of sanctification. True sanctification is harmony with God, oneness with him in character. It is received through obedience to those principles that are the transcript of his character. And the Sabbath is the sign of obedience. He who what? From where? From the heart obeys the fourth commandment will obey what? There is a secret to overcoming. Are we together, God's people? Okay. But this was lost sight of in the time of Christ, to the point where when you read Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 and verse 18, this is the first sermon that Christ preached after beginning his earthly ministry. And look at what he says. He says, think not that I am what? I am come to destroy the law or the what? Or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to what? Okay, 18. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be what? Now, have we understood the implications of Christ's words? Sabbath breaking and all other commandment breaking had come to the point that if Christ was to simply tell the truth as it is, are we together? He would be thought of as doing this. What does it say here? Destroying what? And the what? Are we together? Okay. And so at the end of his sermon, in verse 28 and verse 29, we're told, Matthew chapter 7, and it came to pass that when Jesus has ended these sayings, the people were what? Astonished at his what? Doctrine. Why? For he taught them as one having authority and not as the what? Not as the scribes. So what is the problem with the teaching of the scribes? It didn't have authority. Okay. Okay, that's one way of looking at it, and it's a good way of looking at it. There was something else about the teaching of the scribes. You see, as they were teaching, it was not clear what obedience was. Are we together? It was getting to the point where they would not say this is white and this is what? This is black. So you'd always be left in suspense as to whether something is right or wrong. And so Christ in the Sermon on the Mount, many times he would just go, hey, you have heard it said, okay, of old, that this. But I say unto you, so basically he's telling them, okay, this is how you should understand it, okay? This is the position on that matter. So he goes through the whole law, most of it at least, especially the last 6 commandments. He goes through those commandments, outlining principles that the people should be doing and how that thing should be properly understood. So, even as regards to Sabbath keeping, there is need for an intentional clarity on the subject. In John chapter 5, verse 17 and 18, we read, but Jesus answered them, my Father worketh hitherto, and I what? I work. 18, therefore the Jews sought the more to what? To kill him, because he not only had what? Okay, but said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with whom? With God. Now, something to think about. According to the custom of his time, Jesus was surely a what? Are we together? Yeah. Okay. Is it possible that if Jesus was to come in our day, he would be labeled the same by professed what? Can you imagine? The person who made the Sabbath, okay, is condemned for what? Breaking the Sabbath by people who he what? Created. Are we together? Okay. So there's need for reform. And so we find in Isaiah chapter 58, verse 12 to 14, this is where we are told about the work of reform on the Sabbath, as in Isaiah 56. And they that shall be of thee shall build up the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of what? The breach. The restorer of paths to dwell in. So, think of a wall. Think of a fence. We have a fence and we're told that there's a breach. Okay? It's not that the whole fence is broken down, okay, but that there's a breach in the what? In the fence. Okay? So we're told that these people, whoever will do this, shall build up the old waste places, and then they'll be called the repairers of the breach. And then so our question is, what is that breach? Verse 13 tells us, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a what? A delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shall honor who? Men? Him. How shall we honor him? Number one, not doing thine own what? Ways. Number two, not finding thine own what? Pleasure, nor speaking thine own what? Words. Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord. Are we together? Okay. Now, there are some key points regarding the Sabbath and Sabbath keeping that we need to remind ourselves of. Number one, it sounds obvious, yeah? Remember the what? Are we together, God's people? We need to remember the Sabbath day. I could say that maybe from observation, this could probably be the one thing that if we really did, all the other things, all the other reminders and things like that would not be necessary. Because often, I don't know about you, but often you find that if ever Sabbath is coming and we're not prepared for it, you can simply trace it to the fact that you really didn't what? Remember. You really did not have it in mind. Okay? So, we don't remember the Sabbath on Sabbath, or when Sabbath is beginning. Okay? So the fact that we're supposed to remember it, God is asking us to keep it in mind, all throughout the week. And if we really kept it in mind, everything else would be arranged in such a way that when Sabbath is beginning, everything is what? Is in place. Are we together? Okay, and so Sister White says in Counsels for the Church, page 262, paragraph 3, all through the week, we are to have the Sabbath where? In mind, and be making preparation to keep it according to the what? Commandment. We are not merely to observe the Sabbath as a legal matter. We are to understand its spiritual bearing upon how many transactions of life? All the transactions of life. All who regard the Sabbath as a what? Sign between them and God, showing that He is the God who sanctifies them, will represent the principles of His government. They will bring into daily practice the laws of His kingdom. How often? Daily, it will be their prayer that the sanctification of the Sabbath may rest upon who? Them. Every day, they will have the companionship of Christ and will exemplify the perfection of His character. Every day, their light will shine forth to others in good works. And number two, prepare the heart and right wrongs with brethren. Prepare the what? The heart. There are many things that disturb the heart. Okay? And so if these things are still in our hearts as it is that Sabbath is beginning, we find ourselves dwelling on the cares and shifting our minds from worship as opposed to, or at least as we're supposed to be worshiping. Counsels for the Church, page 263, paragraph 4. There is another work that should receive attention on the preparation day. On this day, what? Differences between brethren, whether in the family or in the what? church should be what? Are we together? Let me ask you a question. If we are together, then why is it that even amongst reformers there's so much bitterness? Hmm? Why is it that we simply can't get along? Every week God desired that we should be refreshed, we should be renewed, we should reconnect with each other. Let all bitterness and wrath, malice be expelled from the soul. In a humble spirit, confess your faults one to another, pray one for another, that you may be what? Okay. Now, number 3, especially complete what? Food preparations, and carefully select and present the food to be eaten. Now, we learned that a man's labor is what? It's for his mouth, eh? Okay, yet his appetite is not what? Is not satisfied. In Exodus chapter 16, verse 22 to 28, it says, "And it came to pass that on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses." 23, "And he said unto them, This is that which the Lord has said. Okay? So God made a special instruction. Tomorrow. Okay? What does it say? Tomorrow. Meaning that God knew, okay, this is Friday. I need to make a communication to these people. Tomorrow, okay, is the rest of the Holy Sabbath. Now remember that these people are coming out of what? Egypt, okay? Have they been keeping the Sabbath in Egypt? No, they haven't. So God has brought them out, and then he wants to institute something. So he says, okay, tomorrow is the rest of the Holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which you bake today, and seethe that you will seethe, and that which remaineth over, lay up for you to be kept until the morning. 24. And they laid it up till the morning, as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. Now you remember that on the other days, if they gathered manna and they kept it to the next day, what would happen? Okay, it would breed worms and stink. Okay, so God on this day performed, we could say, a miracle. It was a miracle actually that it would go bad so quickly. But then on this day, he also made another miracle in that it did not go bad. Okay, and it says, "And Moses said, Eat that today, for today is the Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find in the field." 26. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. 27. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the 7th day for to gather, and they found how much? None. 28. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long will you refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? So cooking on Sabbath should be avoided, but it is not therefore necessary to eat cold food. You know, one of the many arguments that is presented in the churches for not eating food cooked on the previous day is that we don't eat cold food. Okay? Now it's interesting that Sister White here is simply telling us that it is not necessary to what? To eat cold food. In cold weather, the food prepared the day before should be what? Should be heated. So is the problem really that they don't want to eat cold food? Is it? No. There's something else to it. We just want to eat food cooked on Sabbath. Are we together? Yeah. And sometimes we need to be that honest. And let the meals, however simple, be palatable and attractive, especially in families where there are children. It is well on Sabbath to provide something that will be regarded as a what? As a treat, something the family do not have every what? Every day. No, we're going to get there, but then, Ellen White continually talks about how we should make it in such a way that when Sabbath is approaching, it should be welcomed as the most joyous day. Okay? Now, many children, when Sabbath is approaching, they dread it. Are you together? They want nothing to do with it. You drag them to church, and you'll be lucky if you have them there on Sabbath afternoon. So prepare items of clothing. I know some of these things for you are basic, but you know it is needful for us to remind one another, even though we're established in what? In present truth. Are we together? Okay. On Friday, let the preparation of the Sabbath be completed. See that all the clothing is in readiness and that all the cooking is done. Let the booths be blacked and the baths be taken. It is possible to do this. If you make it a rule, you can do it. The Sabbath is not to be given to the repairing of garments, to the cooking of food, to pleasure seeking, or to any other worldly employment. Before the setting of the sun, let all secular work be laid aside and all secular papers be put out of sight. Parents, explain your work and its purpose to your children, and let them what? Share in your preparation to keep the Sabbath according to the what? If they learn this lesson, then it will not be difficult for them to continue to do so even when they're on their own. Now, here's another important one. Work in a manner that does not leave you exhausted on what? On Sabbath. You know, there's some of us that work the 6 days because we're told 6 days shalt thou labor. And then we work and work and work to the point where on Sabbath, when we go to church, what happens? We're just sleeping from morning to evening. In fact, we will sleep the morning, and then finally maybe the system starts to kick in, and then you see, I need to eat some food, and then you eat so much that even in the afternoon you find yourself you're sleeping the whole time. So we're told here that when the Sabbath is thus remembered, the temporal will not be allowed to encroach upon the spiritual. No duty pertaining to the 6 days will be left for the Sabbath. During the week, our energies will not be so what? Exhausted in temporal labor, that on the day when the Lord rested and refreshed, we shall be too what? Weary to engage in what? In service. All right? Kacheyo or unfinished work and preparations. This one we have already looked at, but needs emphasis. Any work that is neglected until the commencement of holy time should remain undone until Sabbath is past. Now, let me ask you a question, guys. Is this a simple thing to do? If you are preparing your tofu for Sabbath, okay, and Sabbath has begun, tofu is not done. According to this verse, what should we do? I mean, this quotation. What will you eat then? Water. Excuse me. But you know, the thing is this, maybe for that day you won't eat the tofu, okay? But you will learn a lesson. That I'm starving on Sabbath because I did not what? Finish my preparations. And then from then on, you make it a point to make sure that when Sabbath is beginning, you would have finished your what? But this habit that we have of continuing the work until Sabbath begins, even after Sabbath begins, is the very thing that is making us to continue to what? To break the Sabbath. Are we together? And there's need for reform here. Assemble the family for worship before Sabbath. May God help us here as well. Before the setting of the sun, or at the setting of the sun. Okay, before the setting of the sun, let the members of the family assemble to read God's word, to sing, and to what? There is need for what? Reform here, for many have been what? Remiss. We need to confess to God and to... So even at a family level, this needs to happen. We should begin anew to make special arrangements that every member of the family may be prepared to honor the day which God has blessed and what? Okay. Refrain from business transactions and discussions. Leviticus 23 verse... I have repeated that. I'll get back to it. In those days, I and Judah, this is Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 15. I and Judah saw I in Judah rather some treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in sheaves and ladding asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of what? Burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in that day, wherein they sowed victuals. 16. There dwelt men of Tyre also, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto who? The children of Judah, and in what? Jerusalem. Okay. 17. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, what evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not our fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us, and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning what? Okay. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before what? Before Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be what? Shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the what? Now, I want you to keep that word, after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should be no burden, that should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. 20. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or... Now, think about that. When did these people come? Before the Sabbath. So which day is this? On Friday. Okay? And we're told here that they lodged without Jerusalem once or... The first time they lodged, when was that? Friday evening. Okay? The second time, after Sabbath, which is on what? Okay, and actually, no, it's on Saturday. Of course, yeah, it's Saturday. Okay, let's take it as Saturday. Okay, yes. So, when were the gates opened? Sorry, I'm hearing two answers. Sunday morning, not Saturday evening. Why? All right, we'll answer that question. Then I testified against them, and said unto them, why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the what? Now, they were lodging outside, waiting to do what? Business. And Nehemiah had the audacity to tell them, guys, I don't want to see you over here. I'm going to what? Lay hands on you. You know, I'm just going to pat you on the back. Is that what he would do? He was going to beat them. Are we together? Now, is this a man of God? The zeal of the Lord had consumed him. Okay? And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy what? Mercy. There is need of a Sabbath reform among us who profess to observe God's holy rest day. Some discuss their business matters and lay plans on the Sabbath, and God looks upon this in the same light as though they engaged in the actual what? Transaction of business. Others who are well acquainted with the Bible evidences that the 7 days, the Sabbath, enter into what? Partnerships with men who have no respect for God's holy day. A Sabbath keeper cannot, not should not, okay, cannot allow men in his employ, paid by his money, to work on the what? If for the sake of gain, he allows the business in which he has a what? To be carried on the Sabbath by his unbelieving who? Partner, he is equally guilty for the unbeliever, and it is his duty to what? Dissolve the relation, however much he may what? Lose by so what? Are we together, God's people? Men may think they cannot afford to obey God, but they cannot afford to what? That's what we should be looking at. Are we together, God's people? Okay? Those who are careless in the observance of the Sabbath will suffer great what? Great loss. So may God help us even there. Because some people, we think we can outwit God. No, I'm going to have a partnership. And he's going to do all the work. And I'm just going to stay. But you're not resting. God is counting that you are doing the very work that your friend is doing, running around when it's on Sabbath. Should be 9, eh? Okay, so I think I made a mistake in the numbering. Yeah, because like here I have the number 8, okay? Okay, so I remember what happened. I edited this to be a holy convocation, that we should gather together, assemble and worship together. Because, there's this common belief that is also taking ground sometimes that, as long as I'm at home, on my own, and then you continually do that, excluding yourself from the rest of the brethren. I know that there are times where, because of maybe some persecution issues and whatever, we may be forced to stay away from our brethren. But then we should always try our best to link with others on the Sabbath day, as far as it is possible to do so. It's an issue that I think needs some discussion, and we may have that during the day. Eat for strength and not for drunkenness. Ecclesiastes 10 verse 17. Blessed art thou, O land, when the king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season. For strength and not for what? Now, there's another evil we have beheld under the sun, and that is on Sabbath. Have you noticed that Seventh-day Adventists like to do this thing called potluck? And then what happens at a potluck? Everybody brings their dish, okay, and then you set them there, and then what do? You have to pick what you're going to eat. And then you look at the table, there's so much variety. This person has brought in, and after all, Sabbath meal is supposed to be a treat, right? So everybody brings their treats. And then you have such a wide variety of food, and you are tempted to eat everything, or at least to try everything. And many people, when placed in that type of a temptation, cannot resist. Are we together? Now, you find yourself taking all that food, and you take many different types of food, and what happens to your stomach after eating it? You upset it, okay? Will you be able to listen to the afternoon Bible study? No. And sometimes it may be that you have taken even the at least a good variety, not too much, okay, of a variety. But then there's also the other extreme of eating how much? Too much, and that has a similar effect on our minds, okay? So it's always good to have it simple, and to especially guard yourself when you know a potluck is approaching. Are we together? Are we together, God's people? We need to make these things practical, okay? We need to make them very practical. You know that you're going to a place where there's going to be a lot of food arrayed in front of you. Set it in your mind, I'm not going to eat everything, okay? Or you may even try to arrange what you're going to eat already in advance. And know, and because the devil, he's very clever. He'll make you think that you can eat more on that day than you eat on the other days, and still everything will be fine. Okay? But then once you partake of more than you're supposed to, everything up here at least does not remain fine. So spend time in nature. We're told to keep the Sabbath holy. We should not even allow our minds to dwell upon things of a worldly character. Yet it is not necessary that we should shut ourselves away from and deprive ourselves of the free, invigorating air of heaven. The Sabbath was made to be a blessing to man by calling his mind from secular labor to contemplate the goodness and glory of God. It is what? It is what? Necessary that the people of God assemble statedly for his worship, yes, to interchange thoughts in regard to the truth of his word, and to devote a portion of time to prayer. But, okay, these seasons, even upon the what? Should not be made tedious by their what? Length and lack of interest. Now, during a portion of the what? How many? All should have what? To be where? Okay. Today is Sabbath. Is it not? Today is Sabbath. Okay. I have high expectations from you reformers. Are we together, God's people? We need to have some time today to be where? Outside and enjoy the free, invigorating air of heaven. Okay? Guard the edges of the what? Of the Sabbath. We should jealously guard the edges of the what? On the Sabbath. Okay? Remember that every moment is consecrated holy time. Whenever it is possible, employers should give their workers the hours from Friday noon until the beginning of the Sabbath. Give them time for preparation, that they may welcome the Lord's day with quietness of mind. By such a course you will not suffer, or you will suffer no loss, even in temporal things. Now, this word here, jealously, what does that mean? Do we now understand what Nehemiah did? It was not going to be a sin for the gates to be opened after Sabbath. Are we together? But he decided to keep them, what? Closed. And so even we, there are some things that we can make sure that by the time that the Sabbath is starting, we are away from them. And even just after Sabbath, often the Sabbath, for many people, begins later than it actually has, because we are still in our preparations, but it ends earlier than we just can't wait to get back to some of the things that we've been doing all the other day. That should tell us that maybe to some extent we do not truly enjoy the Sabbath as we should. Okay? Because Sabbath, we would not be dreading every moment of Sabbath to the point where we want it to finish early. We would want it to extend. Are we together? Even up to Sunday or whenever. Make special efforts to educate children on the Creator and His works. We're told that all who have a love for God should do what they can to make the Sabbath a delight, holy and honorable. They cannot do this by seeking their own pleasure in sinful, forbidden amusements, but by exalting the Sabbath in the family. It may be made the most interesting day in the week, so that its weekly return will be hailed with joy by every member of the what? Does that include babies? Okay. No better way. No what? Better way can parents exalt and honor the Sabbath than by devising means to impart what? Proper instruction to their children and to interest them in what? Giving them correct views of the character of God and what He requires of them in order to attain eternal life. Parents, make the Sabbath a delight that your children may look forward to it and have a welcome for it in their hearts. Thus will God be what? Honored in the home. So make provision for livestock. Does it sound obvious? I remember this because I have dogs, and I have 3 of them. They're quite a bunch to feed. And I noticed that there was a time we were really neglecting them. We would go to church, and then we come back, and then you're eating lunch, and then you hear the dog outside, crying because he's what? He's hungry. And then you say, oh, he needs food. And then you remember, okay, we didn't prepare food for him. So what do? Do you now cook and give it to him? And then your conscience gets troubled about that also. So I thought I would say this because there are many of us that keep maybe animals, pets, and all these other things. It's always good to make sure that in some way, not in a very rigorous way so as to divert us from worship, but then at least so that they are comfortable. Uh, the Lord then answered him and said, Thou hypocrite, doth not each of you on Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall and lead him away to watering? Now make mercy intentional. That verse I read was a part of this. The next verse says, And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? So Jesus Christ, you will notice that there were certain acts of mercy, like the one on John chapter 5 that we also kind of looked at, the one he healed the paralytic. There are certain acts of mercy that he deliberately did on the Sabbath day to teach people lessons, that these are things that we should be intentional about doing on the what? On the Sabbath day, relieving the sufferings of others. Of course, there is also a certain danger. Okay, that sometimes we know that somebody is sick. Maybe they have been sick for the whole week. And then there are times where we may want to put off their visiting, okay, to Sabbath. And sometimes that causes us to miss some very important things that are actually happening on Sabbath. At least as a general, I always find it best to try to make sure that we visit them on other days, okay? And visit them on Sabbath if we must. It's not really a problem in and of itself. But if we're going to make it a habit to visit the sick on Sabbath, then you'll find yourself always visiting and sometimes missing out on some important lessons. I hope the balance there is clear. Is it? Is it clear? Okay. Yeah, then let's look at the final one. Enjoy the Sabbath. Are we together, God's people? Okay. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a what? A delight. It's supposed to be a delight. And for many of us, it's not enjoyable. If it isn't enjoyable, I think there's one thing we should do, that is ask God to help us to appreciate the beauty of the Sabbath, to appreciate the lessons that He would have us to learn. I, for one, when Sabbath comes, I'm sometimes exhausted, but I'm very thankful to God because He gave us a Sabbath. You know, for many of us, if God did not institute a day of rest, we would destroy ourselves. We would continue to work and work and work, and our bodies would not be able to take it. In fact, I find that it is a miracle that some of our other brethren who do not keep the Sabbath continue as they do. Maybe they have their own rest, okay? But I personally thank God for the Sabbath. And I believe that for each and every single one of us, it should be a day that is enjoyable. And so, by God's grace, there are many things that could have been spoken about. But these are the few things that I thought maybe we should give attention to. There is one thing, though, maybe that before I close, I should say. Sister White talks about the Sabbath being a day of reckoning. That as the Sabbath is ending, we should examine how we have conducted ourselves during the Sabbath, and also how the week has been to some extent in relation to our obedience to God. And so at the end of the Sabbath, as we do that personal examination, it's like every week now we are examining ourselves whether we be in the faith. And if it is that we do that examination aright and ask God to help us, then Sabbath after Sabbath will be growing, and Sabbath after Sabbath will be noting those things that we're doing wrong and asking for God's help to make them right. So that is the last of the presentations that I have had to do on reforms. It is truly my prayer that in one way or another you have benefited from them. I for one have definitely benefited, and I cannot say that everything that I have taught in this week, I am perfect about doing in my own life. I'm not also trying to excuse preaching things that we do not necessarily live. But you understand that Paul said, who is sufficient for these things? The things that we have discussed, they are deep, and they need God's guidance and God's help if it is that we are going to practice them in our everyday lives. But one thing I know about the Lord is that He is merciful, and He is able to help each and every single one of us to do much better than we are doing, to do what is right in His sight on every one of the points that we have discussed. So may God help us, and may we learn that simple lesson that God is the one that sanctifies us. And if there's something that we are struggling with, may this Sabbath, for a start, be a day of overcoming in the light of many days of overcoming. So may God bless the sharing of His word. To Him be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and ever. Amen.
I don't know if there's need for comments or questions. All right. In case there are questions or comments, the floor is open.
I just wanted to comment on Nehemiah chapter 13, where he mentioned about these merchants that came. The way I understood it was not so much they lodged on Friday, lodged on Saturday, lodged on Sunday. I understood it that they were kind of stubborn to hear Nehemiah, because it says, so the merchants and sellers of all kinds of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice, meaning it happened again. Now, because he was guarding the city from what he said in verse 19, those guys were kind of stubborn, and then they said, no, even though they're barring us from coming in, it's like we'll make another attempt. They make another attempt, and they were barred again. To a point now, what Nehemiah now says in verse 21 was now in response to these guys' stubbornness of saying, can't you get it? We're telling you not to come in. We're putting these guys at the gate. So he goes to them now and says, you know what? If you come again, I will lay my hands on you. Because when he resorted now to saying, I'm going to slap you, I'm going to beat you, it seems the gentle measures, you have failed to subscribe to them. That when you came, we barred you. You came again, we barred you. Now this time you come again, I think we're just going to beat you up. So to me, that's the way I understand it per se. That it wasn't just one incident. That they came one time and then they lodged again. But they were kind of stubborn to hear the words of God.
I have a question. The Bible says in Exodus chapter 20 that remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days thou shalt labor and do thy work. Then it says, but on Sabbath thou shalt not do any work, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy maidservant, nor thy vessel, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. So how must we keep the Sabbath if we are a stranger in someone's gate?
And there's another question here. Is it lawful to guard your farm from pests, e.g. monkeys, on the Sabbath, or it's work that should be left undone until the Sabbath is past?
All right. Is there anybody that want to take that?
Who would like to take that question? Anyone in the audience? Elder Giselle?
How should we keep the Sabbath if we are a stranger in somebody's gates? I'll start by that one, and then the second question from the future forum. If you are a stranger in somebody's gates, the assumption being that that somebody is not a Sabbath keeper. Because if he's a Sabbath keeper, then you would simply fall in. You keep the Sabbath together. But if he is not a Sabbath keeper, how must you keep the Sabbath? It depends on the nature of estrangement and the available freedoms to you. I'm saying this because there are some minors who are found in other people's custody. They know the Sabbath, they want to keep the Sabbath, but they are under the custody of people that do not respect the Sabbath. Then those ones are given very limited space. There would be no template as to how they may keep the Sabbath, because it would be as far as the circumstances permit. From the lesson we had yesterday, where we were discussing how Adventists managed the religious liberty issues in the early days of the church, where we were told that it was not necessary to provoke tribulation when it does not require you to. In this circumstance that I've just tried to mimic, if somebody that is a minor is being kept by people that do not respect the Sabbath, not even know the Sabbath, the reaction that the minor may present may fall in the same way that A.T. Jones and Tim were behaving. It may harden off those that are looking after the minor, or it may melt their hearts depending on how the minor will manage the situation. So the guidance I see there is that the first thing would be to engage the owner of the gate, declare your interest, and request for exemptions that are applicable. But if the environment is very hostile, that such exemptions are not permissible, then you don't have a home yet. Begin to think of another place where you can live and exercise your rights, your freedom of conscience. In that case, a hostile environment like that of a persecution has already presented itself, and the way you respond is the way God will guide you. So continue to present the matter to God, ask wisdom from God, and He will guide your steps proportionate or commensurate to the circumstances you are in. You wouldn't expect somebody who is not in such a situation to adequately and ably prescribe a way in which you do manage yourself, because that is a crisis. That's the guidance I may provide on that one. The second one, where there are threats to our fields, there are monkeys that every day you chase them. On the Sabbath you want to be in church, but they don't keep the Sabbath. They also come to feed themselves. What should you do? There are experiences and testimonies that we have been privileged to hear from others that have tried different ways. Others have dared to leave the fields and go to keep the Sabbath. Not just go to church, but go to keep the Sabbath. I'm trying to emphasize that going to church and participating in the service until midday, and then in the afternoon you go and see what the monkeys have done, is not what we're looking at here. We're talking of leaving the field on the Sabbath in God's care, and you keep the Sabbath. Others have tried that, but it is also proportionate to the faith. If you have that requisite faith where you can dare God, others have testified God has taken care of their fields. Monkeys have been reported to have devastated neighbors' plots, but left plots of those that believe untouched. Someone was even saying that monkeys were plucking maize from the other fields and eating them in the field of the Sabbath keeper, but not destroying his crops. So maybe looking at that as the best option, it also invites us that as Sabbath keepers, we must pray the prayer of the father of the son, in whom the disciples failed to expel a demon, who said, Master, increase my faith. So we should ask for God to increase our faith, because that's the best option. He has said that if we are faithful, if we return the tithes, and not only faithful in returning tithes, but if we are faithful in all other areas that God wants us to be faithful, if the Sabbath really would be a sign between us and Him, we can dare tell Him that you said I should keep the Sabbath. I am keeping the Sabbath. Please preserve my fields. But that should not be seen when the threat has come. We should develop that relationship with God that will give us that requisite faith, even when the threat is not there. So that when the threat comes in, you will not have to be reactive in finding an option. Otherwise, if we are to be at the field chasing monkeys on the Sabbath, depriving ourselves from the relationship and the fellowship, that would not be good. For sure, from what we have studied, there would be a lot that you'd be missing out. It may also not have a clear-cut answer, because as I've said, matters of faith are personal, matters of conscience are personal. One would say, in the statement that Christ said, we read it, when he was talking of hypocrisy, he said, don't you lose your ox on the Sabbath and take it for watering. One would use that as an argument to say, in that statement, Christ was not implying that losing the ox to feed them on the Sabbath was something wrong. But at the same time, if you carelessly do that, if you don't make provision for it and you carelessly do it, then there's a problem. So similarly, even in taking care of these fields, if you freely indulge in taking care of the fields because you think you are preserving what you should be eating the next months coming, I find that may put you in a trap where you'll be careless on a number of things, and you may be surprised that God would say, I did not know you. So these are tough questions, but they border on a personal conviction and the level of relationship that one has with God, because they require faith. Just wanted to start. I saw more hands. The Mandola's hand is up. Maybe he may help. Okay. No, I'll take it.
I just want to try to be on the more practical side. Matthew 10, verse 16 says, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." I honestly believe there is also a responsibility that God has placed upon us to do things that are within our powers to do. We've had testimonies even from other country living brethren who have had problems not just with monkeys, but some of these other creatures who would come into their field and eat their vegetables and things. Now, what was within their power to do was to put a gate around those vegetables. Okay? I don't know whether that is an expression of lack of faith, that you don't believe that God can protect your things while you are away. Because when you are there, you are able to, to chase them off and things like that. But when it's Sabbath, they will come and have a party. Now, what they simply did is to put a fence around this thing. Now, for me, the way I look at it, I do not consider it as a lack of faith. If you make provision that you can do, humanly possible, that you can do, that there's something that you can do it and leave the remaining elements with God. For others, that issue of monkeys, practically, I too live in the village, it is to have a dog. Now, when you have a dog, those monkeys come, the dogs will chase them away. Now, is that lack of faith? That this person has dogs? You are supposed not to have dogs to demonstrate that he believes that his garden is going to be taken care of. So I just want to highlight the element that Malachi 3:11 promised indeed truly, I think as Elder has already alluded to, that God would rebuke the devourer for our sake, etc. But I think Matthew also says, I want you to be clever as a servant. There are things which are within your power that you can actually accomplish to do. Yeah, so even on Sabbath, people come and steal clothes and what, because they know you're not there, especially out there in the countryside where we don't have servants who are many. You probably adjust yourselves. If you have a servant, maybe your servant is also a Sabbath keeper, and there's nobody at home. They don't want to come there, and the monkeys also come in houses, by the way. They come in the houses, they eat your food. Now, what should you do? Should you just stop at saying, you know what, let's pray the Lord should rebuke the devourer? I believe there's an element where within your power, there are things you can actually do and leave the remaining part with God. That's my take.
All right. Excuse me. I have 3 comments. Firstly, the first comment is in light of Elder Mandela's comment on Nehemiah chapter 13. I will honestly say that in my original, or at least in my reading of that text up to this point, that's what I had believed. But then I'm very thankful for the insight that he has given. It has opened my eyes, and I believe that it is more accurate to the text to consider it like that. So I also confess that I am a student and learning, and I have seen that that is how at least we should look at the text from now on. So maybe you might understand my dealings with that text up to that point, as far as my understanding was. Secondly, regarding the issue of enemy, not a stranger within the gates, I wanted to just add that if the person is a minor living in the home of another, obedience in all other things is very important, and even the expression of the same to the guardian is very important. They should understand that only those matters that are contradictory to your belief in God and to His requirements are the things that you will not be able to obey them on. But that in everything else, you demonstrate even in your life that you are trying to obey them and that you do not seem rude. So that's the extra thing that I can say on that. Regarding the monkeys, I could say that I agree that we should do the best in our power to protect, and then we should leave the rest with God. Just as with health reform, we're told, you prepare the best food you possibly can, and then you pray to God that He should bless the food that falls on your table, that is on your table, and you leave the rest to Him. For me, I think as an extension, we're talking about monkeys coming to take things. What about humans? What happens to the things that are in our homes? When we leave our homes, we lock them, okay? But let's say we have a case of theft. So what do? Do you have to stay at home or make sure that there's someone at home every Sabbath to be guarding the things that you have? Let's do our best. Let's protect what we can with all the measures we can. And there will be times maybe you may not be able to do anything physically. And we'll have to leave the rest to God and trusting in Him that He will be able to protect our possessions. Amen.